morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode.
Working on OpenShift
and sometimes we haven't.
This is so
We
awesome.
are an open culture that believes
It's actually
in
a big
importance of
piece of the component for your GitOps work.
Everybody has something that they can say.
On top of the Red Hat portfolio.
All right. Good afternoon, Gitopsians, and we are live. If you saw the episode summary, you saw the LinkedIn, the Twitters, the Reddits, I don't know where else we posted this thing, all the places. You should know by now. You should know by now that we are joined today by our guest, Christopher Nuland. Chris is a cloud success architect here at Red Hat. And in a moment, we're going to let him introduce himself. But first, I think Christian had one quick little announcement.
Yeah. So one quick, by the way, hello, everyone. One quick announcement here. I'm still trying to, I don't know about you guys. I'm still trying to get back from shutdown, right? Red Hat shutdown. It's kind of, I had like 20 days off. So I'm like, still trying to dig myself out of email. However, big announcement. If you don't follow me on Twitter, go ahead, follow me on Twitter. That's it right there. And for those of you who are Mastodon, I have a link to my Mastodon account there, so you can follow me there as well. So if you haven't seen the announcement there, some of you know that I am part of the Open GitOps events committee, right? So not only am I a maintainer at Open GitOps, but I'm also I'm a co-chair for the events committee. And usually we have GitOps Con at as a co-located event with KubeCon, Cal Native Con, right? There's been a big change, right? So first of all, GitOps Con is still happening. GitOps Con is still going to be a thing. We are moving. GitOps Con is moving to Open Source Summit, right? So it'll be a co-located event to Open Source Summit. So that's like one big thing, right? So we're, instead of being co-located with KubeCon, we'll be co-located with Open Source Summit, both North America, which will be Vancouver this year, which I think is really cool. Haven't been back to Canada in pre-COVID days. Love Canada. Love Vancouver, by the way. And then we're gonna do Open Source Summit, co-located Open Source Summit in Europe, right? EU, which will be in Bilbao in Spain, right? So we will still have GitOps Con. So that's one big thing, right? We're still having it. We're still moving it. It's gonna be bigger now, right? It'll be a multi-day, multi-track event. Usually it was just one day, maybe one track. Recent years, it's been two tracks, right? One day, but now we're gonna have multiple days, multiple tracks. It's going to be a lot bigger. We are partnering, and this is the third thing about this announcement. We are partnering with CDCon, right? So it's going to be a CDCon / GitOpsCon, right? It's all related, right? the CD Foundation, Argo CD and Flux, right? All that GitOps thing is all focused on CD, so it's just naturally kind of good to kind of blend it together. It's called CDCon GitOpsCon, right? Although it's mushed together, it's actually a multi-day, multi-track event, and there will be a big GitOps component of it. CFPs are open, so I will paste that here. I'll paste that in the chat. CFPs are open for CDCon or GitOpsCon. So if you're doing anything with Argo CD, with Tecton, with Jenkins, around GitOps, this is we're looking for papers. So that's the big announcement. We're moving to in order to make the event bigger. And so I see Gerald's on chat saying British Columbia is the best. Yes, I do like BC. BC is cool. It's one of my I guess because it's north, right? I can just fly straight up from here from LA, so it's a shorter flight. But yeah, it's fun. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks. Let me. Is this how we're doing this?
Oh, there we go.
We could do it this way.
Yeah.
Sorry, folks. I'm still trying to figure out how I want people to look. Okay, there we go.
It's funny and also I'm wearing the shirt this time since Hilliary gave me a hard time last time. So, yep. Anyways.
Okay. So that said, yeah, submit your CFPs, guys. That'll be fun. minor thing. It was asked to me privately, what is the green thing in the background? For folks who've been around the stream for a while, you remember that my unofficial job title is Chief Mermaid. It's a mermaid tail. That's it. That's what that is. Asked and answered. You're welcome. So that said, I will hand everything over to Chris, who is going to talk to us about his experience in cloud migrations with Enterprise and Konveyer.
Awesome. Thank you, Hilary. Yeah, my name is Christopher Nuland. I've been involved in migrations for about 14 years now. Most of my professional career has been in cloud migrations. I actually started with Oak Ridge Labs, just when a lot of the cloud technologies were taking off and container technologies. So this was pre-Docker, kind of in the late aughts. Spent some time in the finance industry doing microservices. And then the last 5 years, I've been with Red Hat as an OpenShift specialist, dealing mostly with large-scale Fortune 500 migrations. So I've done quite a few migrations with like mid-sized companies, but I've also done a handful of even Fortune 10, Fortune 50 companies where we're talking about anywhere between 500, 1,000, even beyond that over the course of a year or two. One of the big points that we've had in this migration space, especially in my new role as a cloud success architect, where we're talking about enterprise companies that are just wanting to close down their data centers completely and move into the cloud. When I think we're seeing a lot of these larger companies play catch up compared to where some of the smaller, medium companies that have a little more agility have been really taking advantage of the cloud over the last 10 years. What I've seen mostly from enterprise is that they've kind of tested the waters. They've had some greenfield, they've had some hybrid cloud, maybe a few different things running, but we're seeing a large effort from large organizations to start picking up a lot of their legacy applications, refactoring those, and then getting them into the cloud in services like Kubernetes, EKS, OpenShift, Rosa, ARO. That seems to be really the hot direction we're seeing a lot of these large organizations going for. I think this is the best time to start talking about GitOps with these organizations. I have seen GitOps be a very powerful tool so far in these types of large migrations. When we can get buy-in with organizations to look at GitOps as the primary tool for these migrations, the success is always significantly higher and the velocity is significantly faster. And this is one of the main things that I was really interested when I heard about your show, that I think there's a lot of benefits for your users who are listening today, that there's a lot of opportunities here in the GitOps space. So a couple of the points and I wanted to check first, Hilary, did you have any questions for me before I kind of jump into some of my categories I wanted to talk about?
Well, I actually have more anecdotal than anything else. Like, so you say you work like with like large enterprises and SMBs, right? Who do you find? How do I ask this question? I'll just ask it the way I'm thinking it. Who was the easiest to migrate, right? So a lot of us, assume big enterprises, they take a longer time to shift, but you'd be surprised in some places how fast they can go. I've known like smaller mom and pop type or smaller startups type that they're actually slower because they try to move fast. They're slower to change technologies, right? Because they need to I can't change because I need to release in a few hours, right? And a few hours after that, we need to do another release. Like it's hard to. So like I guess in your experience, right? Like what do you see, right? Do you see a contrast between, or is it all generally the same, or who do you feel has a better? What has your experience been?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. And my experience varies quite a bit depending on the organization I'm helping. I tell people that migrations are less about the technology and more about the people and the logistics. it's important to make sure that everyone's on board and on the same page. Where I find migrations fail is when those expectations haven't been communicated across an organization. So you have a team that's handling this migration, and then on the side, you have these app teams, and maybe they've heard some rumors about an app migration, but then you go up to them and say, "Oh, hey, we're ready for you. Time to go." And they just haven't heard anything. And the expectation, it leads to hard feelings. You're injecting work into their, things that are very important and critical for their workload. So that's where I find the most velocity is making sure to set those expectations up front, and then kind of circling that back then to the GitOps conversation. The second thing would be just a central source of truth. There needs to be one place where you know that there's information on the status of a migration. Organizations that are having spreadsheets all over the place and each one's running their own boards and their own data, it leads to vast confusion. And this is where I think GitOps plays such a critical role, because you can have a central source of truth and you can have information, especially with some of the tools I'm going to talk about here later. These tools exist inside Kubernetes clusters, and getting the information as close to that source of truth, which is what's going to eventually execute on your migration and your deployments, is what's then going to get that information back to critical stakeholders who are making decisions and need to be able to identify how the velocity or any challenges that are coming up in these types of large-based enterprise migrations.
That was really thorough. I wasn't expecting such a great answer. Wow, cool.
Oh, okay. Bye, Waleed. Good night.
Yeah.
This episode is by and large, we're all saying good night to him now. By and large, by his request, actually.
Yes.
I had posted on Twitter at the end of the year last year saying, okay, I'm planning for Q1. What do you all want to see? And he was like, Konveyer? And I was like, I'll work on it. Right? Which, fortunately, that was very easily done because you and I had already had some levels of conversations by then. So, sad that he can't stay with us live, but he knows how to reach me if he has questions later. So, that said, Chris, we're just gonna turn it over for you, and this is your show now. You get to run it.
Yeah, sure. So, what I always recommend, and I'm approaching the conversation today from a very high level, more from a methodology kind of theory approach on how we handle migrations and how GitOps plays in that. I know, Hilliary, we've already talked about if people are interested, I think there's opportunities maybe for me to come back and maybe do a demo of how I would then structure this from an execution standpoint. But again, I'll be talking more from a high level. Going to what I was just talking about with you both, it really does start with this central source of truth. And where I've seen a lot of failures in my experience have been when there's a breakdown in that source of truth. And when we're talking about migrations, we're talking about a few different phases. So traditionally, especially when we're talking about a large enterprise migration like this, there's usually what we would call an analysis phase. So this is where you're going in and you're trying to identify if something's ready to be cloud native or even just be rehosted. Oftentimes, there's a lot of challenges in bringing an application, especially a legacy application, over into the cloud. There's conflicting technologies, even in microservices. The example I always give is, when microservices were really taking off, the Netflix stack was very popular. So there's a series of tools that you would use, like Eureka and others, for communication between microservices. And a lot of those just don't play nicely with Kubernetes. Kubernetes has its own DNS. It has its own tools for doing that type of communication locally from container to container, from pod to pod. So these are the kind of things you need to identify. And a lot of times these are the things that are going to halt your migration up front. This is where tools, and I'll be talking a little bit more about Konveyer here in a moment. Konveyer has a series of tools that help with this type of migration. And I'll be, like I said, circling back to that here in a moment. After the analysis phase, there's just the execution phase. This is the phase where you are actually bringing things over. You're pressing the button, and things are going. The analogy that I like to use the most, and I really suggest you treat your migrations this way, is to treat it like a train station. Things are going to be going at a certain point. You're either on the train or you're not, but it's going to be leaving at that point. And you're going to have to catch the next train. Don't fall too much in this trap where you're going to be, if people will I always say migrations are very challenging for organizations. They're very resistive because most of the people aren't going to be wanting to do this. Like I said, you're interfering with other people's work. They're trying to make improvements to applications and processes within an organization. So always be thinking about that. And from that point, make sure that they know they have these set points where they can move. I know a lot of people, when they talk about migrations, they like to focus more on the dependencies. I think that can be a dangerous trap because then you're going to end up with this web. They're going to say, I have to move that person, that person needs to go first. And this is where organizations where you can test, especially in microservice type of architecture, it's very handy if they can test locally or within a smaller scope, and then wait for the larger scale systems test later on. And that's not what I find very effective. If you are going by dependencies, then it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a wide web of who's going to go first. And I see, and to your early question, that's when you try to do a migration that way, it usually what ends up being, you're adding more complexity and more challenges. My approach has always been what I call the low-hanging fruit approach. Try to build confidence in your team when you're doing migrations, especially from maybe a legacy system or maybe you have on-prem like an on-prem system that's running like Docker Swarm, or maybe an older version of Kubernetes, and you're moving into something like an OpenShift Rosa or some of the other more cloud-native platforms that are in the cloud. I would highly recommend just building that confidence. Find the low-hanging fruit. Find those applications that are stateless and are going to be a lot more easy to move from this kind of more traditional platform to more of a cloud-native. Don't worry as much about the dependencies until you actually need to validate that all those things are communicating with each other. And how this kind of circles back to GitOps from an execution standpoint, there's a few advantages. So when I've used Argo CD for a few of my migrations, you end up having what I call a receipt. That's the beauty of Git, is that you have this account of when things went and what were the effects after that. Was it a successful deployment? What were some of the errors? What were some things that we saw? A timestamp. And for large enterprise organizations, this is very, very critical. And it's very critical because there needs to be an account of when and the status of different applications as they're going in. And especially in a large organization, you have a lot of stakeholders who are very invested in this. They need to know, they're not interested in all the technical details. They just want to know, when did it go and was it successful? And this is where, like I said, the source of truth is very important. A spreadsheet may have some of that information, but it may be stale. It may not have been updated. And this is the beauty of GitOps. And the model I'm really pushing for, more and more is get all that migration information into your Git. Now, you may have spreadsheets, but let the spreadsheets be updated from that source of truth. And that then kind of goes into the next conversation about Konveyer and some of the tools. But Hilliary and Christian, do you have any more questions on some of the things I was just talking about?
So, I was listening to you talk about this, right? And we're gonna go this way. So I'm listening to you talk about this and the low hanging fruit and everything like that. It to me, like, it sounds very intuitive. But I also come from that quality engineering background, right? People have heard me say about this, right? 11 years I spent in quality engineering. And so the thing about that is kind of recognizing the dependency circles versus the low-hanging fruit. And so I actually am about to ask you this question. Do you leverage the knowledge of the folks who are doing the quality engineering to determine what is the most modular and like easily migrated piece? Like, how do you identify the low-hanging fruit? Do you lean on their expertise because they would probably know, or do you have other methods of doing it?
Absolutely. So in that analysis phase, I always recommend to have an individual meeting with each application team. So one thing I don't like those big bang, let's all get in a room, talk about migration, and then we're done. Because migrations are very personal, and each application team is going to have a different need and approach. Usually I've had an analysis of the application previously to this, where I've used like Konveyer Tackle to do an in-depth analysis of some of the technical challenges around this application. But from a dependency standpoint, the application team is going to know the most. A lot of those QA, SRE people are going to be the ones that are going to be able to identify those dependencies compared to what a dependency graph will show. So it's a very combination of both, I would say. But no, we lean very, very heavily, in my experience, on those type of people to know best. More of what I was saying earlier was just getting into, like you said, that dependency circle. And then what you end up with is not being able to deploy applications because you have all these cross dependencies. And then you run into a game of who's going to go first. And it could end up that and this is what usually happens, because when you do that game, especially with enterprise organizations, the core dependency, the lowest common denominator, is usually going to be some monolithic application or mainframe. And they're usually the people who are going to go last. So in that case, that's where the kind of low-hanging fruit comes in, where you want to build some of that momentum. But the next stage usually is then finding those lightweight dependencies that can get moving into the migration in like so we use the two terms I hear most in industry are what we call waves or batches. They're the same thing. It just depends on the organization you're talking to or the tool you're using. But these are kind of the how you organize different phases of your migration. And usually within the first phase, you're looking at those low-hanging fruit, or the first wave. But then in the second one, that's when like you said, you're really starting to engage those SREs and those QA engineers on what needs to go based off of the level of difficulty.
So I have done a different but similar migration. Well, I mean, I've done a lot of migrations in my life. But the hashtag last job, but not the same last job I shared with Christian, because that one was actually 10 years ago, but actual last job. One of the things that we did, we had IoT servers, right? And then so we went from a monolithic stack for the IoT server, and we were migrating it over to a microservice-driven Kubernetes based stack on that. And yeah, even in something like that, which is like totally not enterprise, right? The tangled web we weave into our software is I don't think we really think about it so much when we're going through these processes in those, I'm gonna call them old. In those old monolithic architecture approaches, I don't think we really truly appreciate how tightly coupled we make things until we start breaking things off into microservices. And it's like, wait, which service needs to own this piece? Because of, and then like, I don't, I don't know. You've probably seen it. I've seen it. You get the new architecture diagrams, and there's like 7 versions of where different functionality could possibly live based on X, Y, Z conditions.
Yeah. And that's where I think the integration testing is so critical. And that's when you have to define when is your integration test. And usually that's going to be after multiple phases of your migration are going on. So there may be things that are moving into the cloud that you can test on a smaller scale, but usually that switch over, which I'll talk about in a second, doesn't come until that integration point when you have all those tightly coupled things figured out.
Can I define the testing levels for those who do not know?
Do it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I wish I had a whiteboard. Okay, folks. Types of testing. There are multiple types of testing. There is black box, there is white box, there is gray box. What is the difference between those 3? Well, black box means you have nothing but the user experience. White box means you have all the things. Access to the backend, to the logs, to the code, to the commits, to the anything you could possibly want. Gray box means you basically only have logs. And if you're very lucky, also some observability metrics. Okay, this is important. Because then, in addition to those like 3 main categories of testing, you have different levels of testing, right? So folks who are familiar with the concept of unit testing your code, that would be like functional testing. Does this thing do the thing I want it to do, right? Regression testing. When I added more things to that function, did I break any of the other aspects? Okay. And that regression piece actually is like very small to full system end-to-end wide. Because what you're looking for is, did I introduce a problem? And that happens at every single layer, right? So that's a regression test. An integration test is, okay, now that I know my thing works the way I want it to work, does it work with the other things it's supposed to work with? Which means things like, this is going to call over to a third-party API. Let's call it an Amazon API, because those are very common, right? It's going to call over that. So you need to do an integration test, one, to make sure that it's like actually works with it. And you also need to do negative testing in there of, and you can use unit testing for this and mock APIs for this and all kinds of ways of doing this. But also, do I error handle correctly when that API is not there or gives me an unexpected response? Okay. So when he's talking about then doing all the integration testing, especially in a migration, where you actually could be hot swapping out components like networking components from actual hardware to virtual hardware, these are how you, one, stage those things and so you can understand what they do before the move, and then 2, verify those things after the move. So what did I got? I got the functional, I got the integration, I got the regression, load and stress. Load and stress testing. Do you know the difference between load and stress testing? Oh, wait.
I'll bite. All right. Load testing is for me as an admin is how much load can an application take, right? What's the high mark, right? Of what you want your low and your highs, right? And you want it to know where your application, what's the minimum amount I need and what's the maximum amount I need in order to run this application. That's load. Stress testing, that is what I'm experiencing now because I am taking this test of what stress testing is. And so stress testing, I would imagine is like, where does the application fall down?
Yes, but there's one key difference between the two things, and that is duration. Testing should occur over long periods of time. The longer, even the better. Stress testing is very acute. And so the stress testing is how you identify what your auto-scaling rules ought to look like, right? So not only are we going to start hammering this application from all ends, but we're going to do it really, really fast. And then we're going to do it faster the next cycle. And so you're not going to do it for long periods of time. It's going to be nice. Yeah, the biggest spike it can handle, exactly. This is your, can my web store handle Black Friday traffic? That is what you do to determine it, because you will have very, very sudden spikes. And you want to know, how long does it take to scale? How does your application behave while it's scaling? What is the user experience while those scalings are happening? all of those things that you do in load and stress testing. It's been a minute. Did I forget a type of testing? Somebody will know. If I did, it'll come to me afterwards. But anyway, those are the types of testing, and you have to employ all of them for a successful migration.
Absolutely. And to that point, the functional testing is very much the type of testing when you're bringing over the individual pieces. That's where, like that low-hanging fruit analogy, you can functionally test it, but not until all the pieces have been moved over that it relies on can you do that integration type of test. And that's where, like, to your point, Hilliary, that's where the SREs and testers and QA engineers are so critical to these types of migrations. They're the ones that are going to find the issues before you go live. And that brings me to my next, the final phase of a migration is the cutover. That's when you are pressing the button and going from point A to point B. I'm not going to talk too much about this since we're a little more we're focusing more on the GitOps side, but there's a few different variations. You can just do what we call like a big bang cutover. It's just everything at once is getting moved over. You just press a button, and that's where you hope a lot of that integration testing has been done prior. But then there's also like an A/B type of deployment where you can deploy from a percentage. So, and that's always what I recommend if you have that capability. Start your new cloud platform at like 10% of traffic, and maybe you have an old on-prem, and then just slowly kind of build that number up over some agreed upon time. But yeah, those are kind of the three major phases. There's obviously some subcategories that go into that, but I do want to phase a little bit more into Konveyer. So Konveyer is an open source project, and it's recently been included in CNCF. And its primary function is migrations. So tools around migrations. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen a little bit and talk about some of the tools since they're listed on the site. Let me go ahead and do that. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep, I activated it. It should be there now.
Perfect. So Konveyer right now is a set of different sub-projects, which I'll kind of dive into right now. The direction that the community is going is to more consolidate this a little bit more into one project that then has like add-ons. But this is just for more historical reasons. This is a project that's come together from a bunch of smaller projects. So we're kind of seeing that evolution of it be kind of maturing into its own kind of singular project. But just to dive into what there is now, and I'll be focusing more on Tackle here in a moment. But Crane is a project tool that if you're going from a Kubernetes instance to another Kubernetes instance, it's a very powerful tool that will make that possible. And this is all manifest-based, which is right in line with GitOps. So if you're doing, let's say you're going from like a vanilla on-prem Kubernetes and you're moving into like OpenShift Rosa on AWS, well, this is a really amazing tool where you just kind of point at the two locations, and then it will not only create a migration plan, which is itself is a manifest. So this is like not a receipt. There's actually a post thing too. So this is more of a plan defined as a manifest. So this is something that you can track through Git, and you can even trigger your migration through your actual commit into the repository. So this tool, like I said, also there's like a receipt afterwards, which is also a manifest. It'll print out all the details from it. Was it successful? Did it fail? Where did it fail? So that's very much from a Kubernetes to Kubernetes pathway. Forklift, I'm not going to talk too much about. That's more taking virtual machines into KubeVirt or OpenShift virtualization, either flavor you're using. And it functions similar to Crane, where there's a series of manifests, there's an operator that then executes on that migration. The two that I want to focus the most on are is this move to Cube and Tackle. Tackle is the tool that is a very powerful pre-migration tool for analysis. So it'll go and actually take a look at your repository and come up with different critical elements that need to change before moving into the cloud. When we've surveyed a lot of our users and in some people in enterprise, this is where we hear the most challenges. It's, hey, I know I want to go to the cloud, but I don't really know how to get there. I know what the business people are telling me, but I don't know if our applications are actually ready to make this move. And these kind of tools have been usually done through different consulting firms. They have the kind of their own in-house. This is really the first open source tool that's really enabling the community at large to be able to do these type of analyses. This is, like I said, it's an open source tool, so all the rules are there. You can take a look at them. Right now, they're very Java focused, just given the history of where this tool is coming from, and most enterprise applications we're dealing with right now are in some form Java based, but that's being expanded in different directions. So if you have a passion for maybe Python migrations or .NET, there's actually opportunities then to give back to this community in a lot of ways. It's not just looking at just those core platforms. There's other things there too, like with, is it ready to go to Quarkus? Is there opportunities to move from like Java 8 to Java 11 or future versions? I'm not going to dive too much into this. I think this is good for a separate demo in the future, but I do have the tool up, which I can kind of give you a look into it. There's what's this called is the assessment. The assessment phase is actually, it's not linked to a repository. It's more of a series of questions about how your team functions and how the application functions. And so this is more of a questionnaire that then gets combined with what we call the analysis phase. And then this is the tool that actually goes in and does the breakdown. And I'll go ahead and just show you what one of these reports looks like. And it breaks it down, which is really cool. It even gives you like an estimated story points. This is very, this isn't like any real scientific value here. It's more of just a suggestion. So like maybe 65 points, you'll end up realizing it's maybe a little bit more like 40 points for your team, but it gives you like a gauge of level of difficulty of what they're thinking. And then all these type of different issues that go into it. There's a whole dashboard, what's mandatory, what's optional, what's potential. And all of these are based off of the different rules that are actually embedded into the tool. And there's, like I said, opportunities for you to help give back in ways where you could help expand on these.
Can you zoom in on parts of your screen? That particular view, it just was a little...
Certainly.
Little small. There we are.
Yeah. Well, what's cool with it? So, like, what I've always wondered, and I'm purposely asking dumb questions. What I've always wondered, I would like to go maybe a little deeper, maybe not too much because of time, but so with respect to applications specifically, right? So let's remove the VM aspect of it, like you said before. Mm-hmm. So let's say, like you say, you have a Spring application, right? You have a Spring app. What's the difference from using something like Konveyer versus using something like S2I or build packs or something like that, right? Because the idea of source to image, right? It's like I just take my source code and you build a container out of it. So what's the difference between running S2I and running it through Konveyer, right? Can you kind of like go over those differences?
Certainly. So Konveyer is more of a refactoring and replatforming tool, where S2I is more of a tool to help speed up your deployment into something like OpenShift. And the nice thing about Konveyer too is that it's not locked into any specifics around any version of OpenShift or any other version of Kubernetes. It's very focused around the vanilla Kubernetes that then built on to the other flavors. But really, like I said, it's really a refactoring tool or a replatforming tool. And for those that don't know, we have different types of migrations. Like a rehost
there's that chart, right, from Gartner, right? The
Yeah.
R's, right? Refactor,
Right.
rehost, retool. Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And just a rehost is just kind of lifting. This would be like taking a VM out of VMware and just plopping it right into the cloud and hoping for the best. Replatforming would be something like moving from something like Pivotal Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes, where there's usually a little bit more effort involved, but not any change necessarily to the core applications, at least significantly. There might be some middleware changes, but the hope would be there'd be less of those. Where refactoring is really going in and saying, this Eureka service discovery in my Java microservice is not going to play nicely with Kubernetes DNS. And I'm going to have to just rip that out of my applications to make it then be ready to play nicely in this type of environment. And there could be things where it's like, well, this type of Java application or this particular package that's being used is non-compliant with another technology that you're using in Kubernetes. And that's really where it's kind of focused on. It's really focused on that refactoring. Like, how do I change my application in a minimal way to get it into the cloud and take the most advantage of the cloud, which is how I want to present that. It's how do I take advantage of the technologies I'm moving to ultimately? And that's where like that refactoring element comes into play. So Tackle is a very cool tool. I love it. Some of the things that the community is talking about right now is to be able to track more of your migration from this tool. I think that's going to be awesome. That's where your spreadsheet then just becomes a first-class citizen of Kubernetes in a lot of ways. It's all going to be tracked within the Git repository, not in some spreadsheet or that has 10 different versions floating around your organization. That's probably more to come. I think that's the direction we're seeing things going, and that's how I think it relates a lot back to GitOps as well. I know we're coming up to time here soon. I want to have some time for questions. The only thing I wanted to highlight here, and this is where I think if there's some interest from this community here, we could talk, but maybe do like a demo in the future on Move to Cube. So do reach out if you're interested. But I do want to talk about Move to Cube a little bit. Move to Cube pertains a lot to this conversation we're having about GitOps, because it's a tool that does an evaluation of different application sources. So the example I just gave a minute ago was Pivotal Cloud Foundry. So let's say you're doing a migration from Pivotal Cloud to Kubernetes or OpenShift, and you're very new to Kubernetes and you're needing a way to generate all those assets, all those different manifests. Well, that's where Move to Cube comes into play. It'll actually look at your current iteration of your application in, PCF or other platforms, Docker Swarm. Maybe you're just doing Greenfield. There's a few variations of that. And then you then go through this evaluation. It'll crank out your assets. And that's where I think it combines very well with tools like Argo CD, because you can then take those assets and then plug it right into a GitOps approach. And the best time to do GitOps is at the beginning. It's only going to get harder when you've started to utilize your clusters. Now, I still encourage it. It's still possible. There's a lot of really good tools out there to help with taking your current iteration of your cluster and putting it into GitOps. But the best time to do it is going to be at the beginning, and especially during a migration where your source of truth now lives in Git. And one thing I want to talk about before we move to questions is with back to Tackle. Tackle has these features called add-ons. They're just like plugins that you can bring into Tackle. And this is more my opinion of where the direction of the community is going. But I think tools like Move to Cube, you're going to see some of that functionality kind of breaking apart into Tackle as these type of add-ons. And one I wanted to show here was this one that one of the community members has put together. And this one is just, it's happening during that analysis phase that I was showing you. And this is assuming it's assuming a greenfield application or a legacy application that's Java, hasn't been containerized, it hasn't moved to anything like Kubernetes or Docker Swarm. And it does part of that analysis that I was showing before, but then it will also generate your assets like Move to Cube. And I see the future being more of these types of more modular types of approaches, where maybe you're doing this with a Python application, maybe you're doing this with a Ruby on Rails. And this is kind of the hype I'm seeing right now in the community, is having more of these more modular add-ons that will do a lot of this lift and shift for you going into the cloud. And that's where I think GitOps plays such a critical role, because then you can utilize tools like Argo CD along in that pipeline to then make those deployments happen. The only other thing, do check out, we have the state of application modernization here. This is a report that came out last year. It talks a lot about what trends we're seeing in enterprise migration. Things like, companies plan for more than half their custom applications to be modernized for the next year. This is all the way up to 27% within 6 months. So that's actually right around now, actually, given when we did this. So this can just give you an idea of just the impact and scale, what other companies are talking about and where their concerns are. So things like that. And then right to our point earlier, like the difference between replatform, host, refactor, there's a lot of information here. So do check out Konveyer.io. There's a wealth of knowledge here, not just the tools, but really getting into some of the nuts and bolts of these type of enterprise migrations.
Awesome. Yeah, and I put links during this whole everything into the chat. Yeah. Wow, English did not happen for me. I got distracted by
I forgot how to words. Words are hard.
And then words didn't happen for me. So I did put links to everything that Chris was discussing into the chat while he was talking. Hopefully that helps. Can someone explain how I can clarify under version of each? I have no idea.
I know. We need a Java expert, I guess.
Yeah, definitely needed a Java expert in the house.
Yeah, Gerald, if you're still in chat, can you look at that? So there you go. Gerald's the Java guy.
There we go. Gerald. Have you asked Reddit? Because honestly, I get a lot of my very good, hard to figure out otherwise, or I just am not a smart person about it, questions answered on Reddit. No, you can't have my Reddit username so that you can stalk me for my shameful history.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I could ask ChatGPT. That's also an option.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would recommend Reddit if you don't know. I mean, Stack Overflow is always great too, but I have definitely I spent a lot of time on Reddit lately. I also answer a lot of questions in OpenShift on Reddit, and you'll know which one that is because I'm pretty obvious about it. I have 3 Reddits, one for the things I don't want people to know about, one for the things it's okay for people to know about, and one that is literally just for work only.
Yeah. You have a Reddit for your dog obsessed group, right? So
yeah, exactly. The house plants, the dogs, all the other weird stuff. It's not that weird. I'm actually not that interesting a person, to be honest with you. The anime, the video games, the cats. Right. Exactly. I like that our chat is so helpful. Thank goodness we have people who know things in there.
This is a fun chat.
It is a fun.
I'm gonna come back to other episodes just to check out what chat's talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Well,
That was good.
it's yeah. You know what? Like, and what I like about our stream is that like there's like a separate conversation happening on chat, right? You're like, man, chat's pretty happening. I don't know if I.
Our chat is regularly very happening. It's not usually on topic, but it's always happening. And that's a fantastic part of our little user group. Yeah, there's references to things of episodes past, like one of the times my cat attacked me from above the bookshelves during an episode. Occasionally I'll get asked if the cat's still there. The cat is actually down there this time. Although she threw an actual book at me yesterday morning.
Wow, there you go.
And ironically, it was the one titled Humans. But it did like this much with my head.
It's she's gaining sentience. She's getting smarter.
she's getting smarter. She's getting more disruptive. But yeah, so that was that. There was if Waleed was still here, I was gonna pick up my Shiba Inu because he tweeted a Shiba Inu at me. I was gonna pick up my Shiba Inu and but he's not here, so I'll just have to tweet him back a picture of my dog. Yeah. Anyway, but yes, our chat is always interesting. It's actually, this is one of I'm learning so much reading it right now. I didn't know this stuff. That makes sense though. Thank you, Gerald.
Yeah. Thank you, Gerald. Look at that. Gerald
I know,
right? Java questions.
I'm gonna pull that up there right there.
Yeah, look at that. Sweet. See, there we go. See, we help out.
We helped. We're super helpful.
See, here's a good I'll call it a little controversy here. There's someone saying we're running Keycloak in Kubernetes cluster. I'm actually a fan of Dex, so someone
shots fired.
So shots fired. So if the Keycloak team wants to reach out to me, I'll tell you exactly what you need to do for me to change my mind. So there you go. But Keycloak's great, but I've used Dex a lot before in a previous life. So just moving over to Keycloak I'm it does a lot way more than I needed to because Dex just does this one thing that that's helpful. So
here's a poem hang on. I've used Keycloak a lot because it's a central piece of how we do authentication to a lot of the managed services. I've also had to support Keycloak falling over production a lot. But they know. They're actually trying to get it.
Well, there's a chat from Gerald. They should probably put that on. That's the main point. But we'll read your poem out loud right now pretty soon.
Yeah.
But
that's the main point.
This is it. Yeah, that's the main point. Yes.
I was gonna say, interesting thing is they were talking about making a Kubernetes operator for Keycloak using Java instead of Golang, which is a thing. So that's an interesting anecdote that I don't know if they've done it or if they've canceled it or what, but keep an eye on that. And then let's read this poem. I'm going to show it. It's going to cover my entire face.
Yeah.
All right. GitOps Guide to the Galaxy leads us through code and quality with commits and branches in tow to deploys that always flow. In harmony, in GitOps we trust. Ooh, interesting. To guide our ships through space. Through space we must. Redacted.
Wow. Chat GPT. Wow, that's beautiful.
It's a limerick, I think.
It's a limerick. Yeah, it is. The way you read it, yeah, it's like a limerick.
It is, in fact, a limerick. In GitOps we trust is an interesting idea to put on a t-shirt, Christian. Just a note.
Yes, there we go.
We ended up with so much time to just kind of sit around and be silly for a minute here. Chris, you gave us a lot of information is really the truth of it. And I still feel like I have to digest things to be smart about it. But I'm going to preemptively say we're going to have you back to do a demo of some of this stuff because I learned things today, which is always my favorite episodes.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to if when we have you on next time, going through because there's the use case of okay, can I just take my VM and shove it into a container? And when would you not do that? Because there's so many ways to do these migrations, and it'd be kind of cool. I think most people, that's what they try to do, right? They take the VM. All right, let's shove that into a container, and it's
Go
now we're
in.
doing,
It's
go in, ruin it now. Like, oh, we're running Kubernetes now. It's like, well, you're missing the point. But
Yeah, I see the point.
so
You're not
things like that.
efficiently
Yeah.
leveraging your resources. Like, let's just start there with that one. Like, are you going to be using the best? Like, is it the best use of your virtual hardware to do that? Could you actually? You probably can lower your cost by not.
Yeah.
Because
right.
you're
Usually
getting
the trend I'm seeing, and we'll talk more about this, but the trend I'm seeing is usually you have one legacy VM that has some thing on it that no one wants to touch, and it makes sense for it to be, from a data gravity standpoint, to be closer to your containers. So that's where you see kind of this lift and shift of a VM. Yeah, obviously people are abusing it where they're just shoving all their VMs out into Kubernetes space, but that's a talk for another time.
Yeah, exactly. We can go hours on that. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah, no, and so, but yeah, so for those who may not know, when he says data gravity, one of the aspects of that is actually the cost of talking out of your cloud to other locations can cost so much in spend that you'd rather spend inefficiently used compute than the data costs. Is like one example of why you would do that, especially on things that people don't want to touch. And I think sometime middle of last year, Christian, was it we had he was from the University of Michigan, I think.
Oh yeah. Jamie from UMich. Yeah.
He actually had talked about this specifically, the different dynamic a little bit. What is that about? Single replica rules? Single replica rules is like a terrible thing. Don't do that. If you have only one replica, you don't have high availability. You're not a reliable piece of software. Done. End of story. Yeah. The SRE has spoken. That the gavel is down. That is the ruling.
Does that get past SRE? Right? SRE would be like, I'm not supporting that. And
no
way. We won't support it. Yeah.
No, we won't. That's actually fact. You get all kinds of nasty alerts from parts of SRE if you're trying to create an application without a minimum of 3 replica sets with node affinity rules or anti-affinity rules, as the case may be. So like, yeah, no, I don't know exactly what that comment was. I actually have told that to customers. I've actually gone on calls as a favor to friends in consulting and have told them those exact rules. So anytime you want, I will join your customer calls and explain to them why we have these rules, and strongly encourage them to conform to the Red Hat SRE best practice list, which is readily available to them if they want it. Pod disruption budgets, another fun thing. I love them. They're very good. Remember when they didn't have pod disruption budgets?
That was fun.
That was fun. I'm so glad.
There's a story with that, and actually Clayton Coleman actually told this story on a podcast a while back, talking about how like this is how the story OpenShift Online, right? Their upgrades would go down because etcd like needs a certain amount of pods up and running when they're like, oh, we need a pod disruption budget. It's just kind of funny how like these things come to mind. It came from SRE, by the way, Hilliary. So you'll be happy. It's like they were upgrading clusters on OpenShift Online, and they're like, why are clusters just going down instead of like staying up? And it's like, oh yeah, etcd needs a minimum of 2 replicas to be okay. Yeah. There's lots of stories like that. But yeah, we are in fact over time. Stories for days. Gerald does make a good point about preventing nodes from draining so they can upgrade is a real thing. Yep, double-edged sword on that one, but I'm still gonna prefer the pod disruption budget over the not. Gonna go with that one. But you use your technical debt wisely. Choose your technical debt wisely, as I always say. Thank you, chat people, for being so chatty. Thank you, Chris, for joining us. We will have you back for the deeper stuff. Christian, I'll just see you around. Whatever, dude. See you around. That's right. Tired of me already.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, folks.
All right, everyone. Cheers.